Look Now, 1973, and directed by Nicolas Roeg. The script's based on a book by Daphne du Maurier, and it stars Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie in the main roles. The film opens with initially with a very traumatic scene. Sutherland and Christie's young daughter is playing near a pool in the grounds of this elegant sort of mansion where the family are staying. And Sutherland is looking at some slides of a ancient, well, a very highly valued church in Venice, and he's going to shortly be going to Italy to do some work on restoration. Whilst he's looking at these slides, he gets a sort of almost a feeling, a vision of a child in distress, and he puts two and two together and senses that his daughter, who's outside, is in difficulty. He rushes out, and to his absolute alarm, he finds that she is in a pool of water with her face down. He scrambles to the pool. This is behaving very, very strangely, this damn thing. Anyway, there's no narration when this is going on. There's an absolutely superb scene where Sutherland dives under the water to retrieve his daughter, and then he endeavours to resuscitate her, and then, knowing that she has died, he lets out an enormous roar of emotion, and as he holds her tight, and his wife quickly comes out of the building that they're residing in. It's like a sort of abbey, really, or a house of some stately home. And she's seen aghast and running. And the whole scene is absolutely sets this film up. We then move to Venice, and things appear relatively calm as Sutherland is engaged in his work at the church, and his wife is there to support him and to have a break following, of course, the death of the daughter. She then runs into two rather odd-looking women, one of which who's blind and is a psychic. And two women approach Christie and tell her that the blind woman has seen her daughter in the red mac that she was wearing when she drowned. The red mac, and that her daughter is happy and content. This sparks an energy in Christie, who believes what she's hearing, but her husband is less than convinced and feels that it's possibly a sort of a trickster or a scam person, and shows a sense of sort of mistrust of the information, although his wife is thoroughly 100% convinced that the psychic woman has seen her daughter in some sort of a sort of seance type experience. In re-looking at Don't Look Now all these years on from my last viewing, which was probably 25 years ago, I was caught by surprise, but nevertheless quickly remembered how Roeg, the director, handled his direction and the cinematography with regard to the sex scene between Christie and Sutherland. For its time, it was extremely erotic, with nudity and, well, for the camera, copulation. And there was some tantalizing music in the background, which sort of captured the sort of the sensitivity and the intimacy, and at the same time adding a sort of playfulness to it. And certainly it was I think one of the strongest scenes in the movie. Of course, crucial to the film's pulling power, capturing your imagination, is the relationship between Christie and the two women, particularly, of course, the psychic one, and their conversations regarding Christie's daughter. And for those of you who may be sceptical, well, this is all part of the story, and so don't knock it for that, but appreciate how the acting portrays this sort of subplot. Well, it's probably more than a subplot, it's probably the main plot, and the sort of naivety that Christie indicates in her conversations displays a technique acting-wise that's certainly captures your interest as a part of the plot. Another aspect to this movie that I think will appeal is the location. It's shot on location in Venice. And for those of you who haven't had the opportunity of going to Venice, you get a sort of a close circuit look at all the history of the place, particular reference to religious buildings. Of course, the lead character played by Sutherland is restoring a church, and with the help of the mode of transport, which is by gondola, you also get a free ride through the locks, so to speak, within Venice. I've used the wrong word there, but it really is a pictorial view of the city. And so for those of you who haven't gone, as I said, you sort of get a free tourist glance at what it would be like if you were to go there. Couldn't really be a better advertisement. And of course, the lesser aspects to Venice are also shown. Venice has a reputation for having lots of stray cats, which is a slight health hazard, but you get a little look at that as well. But lovely walkways, and I was reunited with these places, the Bridge of Sighs, St Mark's Square, etc., when I re-watched the movie recently, having gone there way back in 1972 or 73. I had a lovely couple of days in Venice, and my camera was constantly on the move. But here again, you get all that as part of Roeg's direction, and the cinematography is absolutely tremendous. Residing in, it's like a sort of abbey, really, or a house of some status, stately home. And then she's seen aghast and running, and the whole scene is absolutely sets this film up. We then move to Venice, and things appear relatively calm as Sutherland is engaged in his work at the church, and his wife is there to support him and to have a break, following, of course, the death of the daughter. She then runs into two rather odd-looking women, one of which who's continuing with scenes to look out for when you watch this movie. As this blind woman is perceived to be a psychic, there's another very tense and chilling scene where she's apparently contacting the dead child with Christie present, and at the same time we see a frantic Sutherland rushing around trying to track down where his wife is, and we also get a glimpse of an Italian who's clearly in distress, trying to find someone, and this is all sort of neatly packaged together to generate this sort of fear and tension for the viewer, so they can sort of imagine or experience to a limited extent the sort of the issue about loss, both in terms of a death or in terms of not being able to find someone. And very clever direction again by Roeg. And of course, the cinematography is extremely dark, and this in itself creates that sort of feeling of wariness and fear. The last few moments of The Secret War of Harry Frigg follows Harry after he's escaped the clutches of the Nazis and reunites with the Contessa back in Italy, and they decide to make a life for themselves, an unusual sort of marriage of sorts, and they go back to the place where they met, very near where Frigg was held captive, and so we get this sort of romantic, good feeling. So the film ends very much on a happy note. Overall, an amusing film, it has to be said. The star of the show is Newman, as usual. The plot is totally unbelievable, but the characters who play the major generals are quite an amusing bunch, and of course, as to be expected, the Germans are seen very much as the baddies. So that's my review of The Secret War of Harry Frigg. To believe or not to believe, Roeg gives us a very clear insight of this, with the two protagonists, so to speak, discussing the merits and demerits of the blind psychic woman. Of course, Christie is totally consumed with a sense of belief with this woman's apparent psychic touch in contacting the dead child, whereas on the other hand, Sutherland is a complete and total cynic and believes it's all basically a scam and a fake representation of a situation. And this then leads to the pair of them certainly involved in one could be construed as a tiff, if it wasn't really on such a serious matter, which clearly it is, being the death of their daughter. But it actually makes one realise how incidents which lead to differences of opinion can hang around in relationships and be quite brutal, could be quite emotional, and also be quite disagreeable. And of course, Christie and Sutherland carry out their roles in this sort of verbal lashings. That's probably an overstatement, but verbal disagreements in a way that is totally realistic. Don't Look Niall's plot takes another twist when Julie Christie's character shares with her husband that the psychic woman, whilst being in touch with this dead daughter, is actually being told by the daughter, yeah, it's a little bit far-fetched, isn't it, that Sutherland's character is in danger if he stays in Venice. And this then leads to his wife pleading with him that they should leave Venice because she's heard that his life is in danger. Well, he responds by immediately going and throwing up after having a bit of a binge on alcohol to try and soothe his anxiety. But it's again a sort of an indicator of how this script is evolving and turning these characters into anxiety wrecks, at least for part of the film. Continuing on with this scene, after he returns from the toilet, having thrown up, and tells us, the audience, that it's been 10 years since he last threw up, he then bursts into, well, frustration and anger towards his wife, screaming that his daughter is dead, and questioning her, and basically saying that she's been taken in by this woman, and that it's hasn't got an ounce of truth to it. And Christie responds by saying that does he, her husband, does he think that I am sick, that I have a mental illness? And of course, he has no choice but to say yes. The script is absolutely gripping. Continuing on then, the character played by Sutherland then returns from the loo after having thrown up, first time in 10 years, and then charges into a very angry statement about the fact that his daughter is dead, and that what his wife is believing is an absolute load of mumbo jumbo, and that she's believing this woman. And it draws out to me the idea that millions of people around the world have this faith, so to speak, this belief in God. And in contrast to this, this is an excellent film, but I did note one major flaw in the script, and a phone call is made from a boarding school in it may be in America actually. So it's probably not a flaw. I thought it might be a boarding school in the UK. but it's made to John, the father, played by Sutherland, about an incident involving their son, and this prompts his wife to take a plane back. I stand corrected. This would clearly have been from the States to Italy, not the UK, because time difference between UK and Italy is only an hour, and the script references night and morning, which would cover the 12-hour time zone changes. We then witness a terrific scene, but really, I'm just wondering how many takes Roeg needed to carry out this scene. John, he's got hold of a mosaic, and he decides to go on a scaffold up into the sort of roof of the church and compare the mosaic with a mosaic in a window in the church. And whilst he's up there, what happens is that the scaffolding breaks, and there's this miraculous scene where he plunges off the scaffolding and manages to grab a rope, and for about 5 minutes he's sort of basically desperately trying to prevent himself from falling, probably to his death, or certainly to a serious injury. And the panic that takes in following this is beautifully put together by the cinematographer. And of course it sort of highlights the psychic's prediction that that he is in danger, which was shared to the wife a couple of days previous. So it all sort of locks together and implies that the dead child has foreseen her father's accident. It's really quite imaginative, but obviously just a complete coincidence. So after the escape from the fall in the church, John then takes a walk with a padre, and they witness a woman being fished out of the canal. And then the next thing is John sees his wife with the two women, the psychic, on a sort of boat going down the canal. He was under the impression that she'd flown to sort out the problem with the son. So it all becomes more of a mystery. And where is she? Is she in England? Was she in England before, or was she in the States? I'm a bit lost. We then move to the situation where John Baxter goes to the police. He's concerned about his wife with a murderer around, as he points out. And he also points out that he spotted his wife with the two women, the psychic, on a boat, and yet she hasn't returned to his place. And he's concerned about the fact that she may well be being held against her will. This is viewed skeptically by the police officer, and again we get driven into this mystery surrounding the ability to be part of a possession. It's not the same as Reagan in The Exorcist, but it's in the same ballpark. This is following the visit to the police station. The plot gets a little bit sort of difficult to follow. John Baxter seems to be intent on trying to track down the missing person, i.e. his wife Laura. The police put a trail on him, so he's being followed, and that he resorts to looking in every nook and cranny in the hope of coming across or spotting his wife or the two women, and it gets a little bit silly, really. He then decides that he's going to try and make contact with the school in England. It is, in fact, England where his son is, to try and, one assumes, ask them about his wife's visit, even though he knows that she's now, well, he saw her on the canal. But what's intriguing about the interview with the policeman it appears to be not entirely convinced about the report by Baxter, and is almost sort of indifferent when he's receiving the details as to why Baxter is now believing that his wife is a missing person, possibly abducted by these two women, one of which is a psyche. Then to add to confusion, John rings the school and gets an update on his son, and to his astonishment is told that his wife's there, even though he assumed that she was back in Venice, because he assumed that he saw her the day before. It was before he reported her missing to the police. So it becomes a real sort of a maze of where was she? Then, as the film moves towards its concluding frames, it appears in the dark of night that everybody is frantically searching for everybody else. John's trying to find Laura, Laura's trying to find John, and then John's eye catches a glimpse of a red Mac, which looks very similar to the one that his daughter drowned in, and so he's sort of mesmerised by this and assumes that it's a child, and he wants to assist. And the final frames encapsulate really the sort of trauma that they've all been experiencing, but I won't describe what happens, but it sort of it hints at a sort of revenge for being lax, and it links with the beginning. Memory recall, 1988. Okay, we've got some videos on YouTube of the early recall of the flight. Let's recall some of the images and events once we hit the mainland. We met at the airport by Susan and the brother, whose name escapes me. Richard, that's it, Richard. And we went to, as I say, the final frames is a sort of montage of flashbacks from throughout the film, going back to the beginning with the drowning, to the images of Venice, witnessing Laura with the two women on a boat, and the religious symbols that we've seen throughout. One thing that did come to mind, I'd like you to pay close attention to the shot of the boat with Laura and the two women on, and you may well come to the same conclusion as to what that symbolises in the context of John witnessing it. I won't tell you what I think. I'll leave it to your perception to have a stab at it. Some observation. Film critic Christopher Noel commented on Don't Look Now, and I will quote, set in the winter of Venice, the fog, darkness and solitude are apt metaphors for the mindsets of Christie and Sutherland, both of whom shine in the underseen pic. Of note is the early on love scene, reputedly so steamy because the two stars got so carried away they actually did the deed. Well, that's worth putting in your pipe and smoking it. And another review that I'm just flicking to get some sort of balance. Is this the one? This is also Christopher Noel. No, I've got that wrong. So this is by Damien Cannon. I quote, part of what makes Don't Look Now special is the location, the fluidity, atmospheric streets and canals of Venice, under the watchful eye of Roeg and cinematographer Anthony B. Richmond, who captures everything from the warm ambience of sunset to the shadowed creepiness of dark, subsiding corridors. As the story shifts past a variety of moods, these become refracted through Venice's prism. One moment there's a hope and joy, the next danger and uncertainty. We appear to be gazing at the unchanged, but like the city, that's an illusion. Roeg ensures that you never quite know whether to believe all that your eyes drink in. It may belong to the assumed contest, but it could easily be a sign from somewhere else. Don't Look Now keeps you off balance. I like this quote from Damien Cannon on his review. Stage your tale in the viewer's mind and the locks on their imagination may shatter, granting access to denied fears. Captures it absolutely. Wrapping his film around Daphne du Maurier's story, director Roeg had fashioned an unusually spooky and effective cinema-going experience. And central are the Baxter family members, all supported by the parental duo, Laura played by Christie and John played by Sutherland. A young professional couple. They have darling children. Unfortunately, in one of those terrible retrospective avoidable twists of fate, the daughter drowns while trying to retrieve her brightly coloured ball.